This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Agun Erev Shabbos Rabbi say, Parshas Vayechi. Vayechi Yaakov v'Eretz Mitzrayim Sheva Esrei Shana. Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim 17 years. Vayehi Yimei Yaakov Shnei Chayav. And it was the days of Yaakov's life, Sheva Shana v'Arba Shana, 140 years, 147 years. And how many years did he live in Mitzrayim? 17 years. And all the Mefarshim are bothered. Why does the Torah have to tell us that Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim 17 years? It's quite obvious, because in Parshas Vayigash, Vayomer Yaakov el Paroi, right? Paroi asked Yaakov, "No, how old are you?" Which is a very unusual request. The first thing, let's say you meet someone, Shalom Aleichem, how old are you? But Paroi wanted to know how old he was, and Yaakov responded, Yimei Shnei Megurai Shloishu Ma'as Shana. I'm 130 years old. So all really it has to say in the beginning of Vayechi is Yaakov lived to 147. And then using advanced calculus you could figure out that if Yaakov Avinu was 130 when he stood before Paroi, and now he's 147 years old, he must have lived in Mitzrayim for 17 years. And yet the Torah goes out of its way to say Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim 17 years. Why? So there's an amazing Rabbeinu B'chaye, and this is not really the focus of today's shir. We're going to offer a new suggestion why the Torah says that Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim 17 years. But Rabbeinu B'chaye says, to me, a very beautiful pshat. Says Rabbeinu B'chaye, this is in his Hakdama to this week's Parsha. V'chein matzinu b'Yosef shepirnes es aviv shva esrei shana. Yosef supported his father 17 years. In other words, when Yaakov was living in Mitzrayim, Yaakov didn't have to work. He stayed home and he collected government benefits. Who supported him? Right? Who supported him? He got good benefits. His father, Yosef, his son, supported him 17 years. Why? V'hi mida keneged mida, measure for measure. B'schus tzedakah sha'asa Yaakov imai, in the merit of the charity that Yaakov did with him. Shepirnes oisoi shva esrei shana, that Yaakov supported his son 17 years, right? Because at what age was Yosef thrown down to Mitzrayim? 17. Sharei k'shepirish Yosef me'aviv ben shva esrei shana haya. He was 17 years old. Shenemar Ela told us Yaakov Yosef ben shva esrei shana. Uvizchush shepirnes Yaakov es Yosef shva esrei shana. He, in the merit that he supported his kid for 17 years, Matzinu shepirnes Yosef liYaakov b'Mitzrayim shva esrei shana. So Yosef supported his father 17 years. Mida keneged mida. V'zehu shakasa vayechi Yaakov eretz Mitzrayim shva esrei shana. Why does the Torah say that Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim 17 years? So you should remember, wow, 17 years. Where did that come from? In the zechus that he supported his son 17 years. So in his old age, in his infirmity, when the world was in famine and nobody had anything to eat, Yosef took care of his father in grandiose style.
Why is it a special zechus to support the child?
Thank you. I should pay you for that one.
I'll tell you what it says in the check.
What? Cash. What? Okay. So what I was bothered by is what Mr. Zalkin is asking. Normally you would say in the zechus that you give tzedakah to an ani ve'evyain, and the zechus that you do chesed, and the zechus that you do is a major mitzvah. I mean, who doesn't support their kid? Everyone supports their kid. Who wouldn't support their kid? So fine. So I understand Yosef giving to Yaakov was taka a big reward for the way he supported him. He gave him a whole city, and he gave him everything he could possibly have needed. But mida keneged mida, what mitzvah did Yaakov Avinu do that warranted this mida keneged? It's a zechus to support your kid. So I think what you see from here is a tremendous insight, really a very important chiddush, and that is, if somebody goes to work and they make a check, why? That's what people do, and they pay their kids tuition and they pay for their kids food because that's what people do. Then taka, it's not as chus. But your own son and your own daughter and your own children, your own grandchildren, they're no different than any other ani ve'evyain. And if your kavana is, these people are taloyami, and I need to go to work to support them, to do tzedakah, to do chesed, then ein l'cha zechus gadol mizu. If it's with the right kavana, in fact, Alter Sabatka says that the chesed you do to your family, in a way, could be much greater than a chesed you do to somebody else. Why? Because if someone knocks on your door and asks you, "God, it's a bracha yid, you mind giving me some money?" and you give them money, as heartfelt as your donation is, and as kind with as much chesed as you're doing, ultimately the beneficiary, the recipient, has a degree of embarrassment, and therefore the chesed you're doing is incomplete. But when you do chesed to your children and your grandchildren, your wife, I guarantee they're not embarrassed. There's no busha. In fact, they take it for granted. They think it's a kid. They think it's coming to them. Which kid appreciates a parent that pays their tuition? Kid appreciates it? They don't appreciate it. It's coming to them, right?
When I had the big kids, then they appreciated retroactively.
Not if you're still paying for their kids' tuition, right?
No, but don't you hope that the investment that you make, even though it's not your kavanah, the investment you make in your children,
you hope they'll take care of you.
And when you become a zakein, and you need to rely on them, that the same chesed, mida connected mida, that you did for them, that they will return to you. Doesn't always happen, because not every...
You hope. But I think...
Because they choose the nursing home.
So, Ren, what you're saying, it's the same as Dukas to only son's embarrassment.
Yeah.
That's why it's bigger.
Yeah, it's bigger because there's no embarrassment. Yeah, the Alter Sabaka says that he says on the Medrash. The Medrash says the biggest chesed Avram Avinu ever did was he buried Sarah. Who wouldn't bury their wife? Right? Who wouldn't do such a thing? If somebody would say, "Nah, I'm not going to do it." The answer is, if you're doing it with the right kavanah, the purpose of chesed is to emulate Hashem. And when Hashem gives us chesed, the key ingredient in Hashem's chesed is we're not embarrassed to take it. What happens? We go to a restaurant and we have a big meal. Why are we not embarrassed? Because we don't even think about who gives it to us. Right? Because Hashem doesn't want us to think. Hashem's kavanah, Hashem is kuloi meitiv. Hashem is such a meitiv. He doesn't just say, he makes himself invisible. We don't even see who the noisein is. So the best way to do chesed is that the recipient shouldn't even think you're doing them a chesed. That's the greatest form of chesed. So you see Rabbeinu Bechaye, that in the schus of the 17 years that Yaakov Avinu supported his son supported him. By the way, four Mefarshim say this. The Rabbeinu Bechaye, the Baal Toises, the Astounding Baal Toises says also, Lama Hiskar Akasav Sach Chayav V'Eretz Mitzrayim. Why does the pasuk mention the sum total of Yaakov's life in Mitzrayim? L'fisha Matzina sheYosef hayasham hayemaviv 17 years before. Ukeshem shepirnes Yaakov liYosef. So too, Kach Yosef pirnesoi v'chilkalo Yud Zayin Shana. Baal HaTurim also says it. Keneged Yud Zayin Shana shegadal hu liYosef. Kilkula Yosef Yud Zayin Shana. By the way, Orach Chaim HaKadosh also says the same thing. He says a beautiful thing. Look at number 6. Uletzad sheyakov zanu pirnas Yosef. How many years? 17 years. T'chsiv Eile toidos Yaakov Yosef ben Shvas Shana. Lazashile ma'bechina halaz v'shpiru leYaakov midas tashlumei kefel Yud Zayin Shana.
Same shot. Yosef always wanted to pay back the Toiva. Maybe that was the mile of Yosef. He didn't take it for granted. Shabbos, since a person, he wanted to give back to his father, he realized what he got for 17 years. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him the situation that he was able to pay back.
I hear. Says Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the remez is Toivim Hashnayim Min Ha'echad. What does that mean? Toivim Hashnayim Min Ha'echad. So it says L'chein Toivim Hashnayim Min Ha'echad. Each echad is toivim. Toivim means toiv twice. 17. Toivim hashnayim min echad. Toivim are the two toivs. Toiv is 17, mitzad Yaakov. Toiv is 17, mitzad Yosef. Another pshat, why the Torah tells us that Yaakov Avinu lived in Mitzrayim 17 years, says the Baal HaTurim, number 7, Shaharishonim lo hayu chayim. The first 130 years were not life. Shahari Amar, Ki ered el bani av el sha'ila. He said he's going to descend with his son to the grave. So what the Torah is saying, Yaakov lived 70 years in Mitzrayim. We know that. Of course you know that. You could figure out the years. The point is, Vayechi, these years were life, as opposed to the first 130, those were death.
Why weren't the first 17 years
Because
of
he was
Yaakov
he was
living
Okay.
He suffered from Laban.
So let's see further.
from 113?
But at least for the last so many years there was death, and now the Torah is saying, but now he's living. Chizkuni says, "Vayechi Yaakov Mitzrayim aval kol she'ar shenosim v'chaylo hayachayim shekol yamav harasharoi b'tzar u'mishabal Mitzrayim nocha ruchai v'chaya v'nachas."
Surah Laban, Surah Esav, Surah Zidah, the whole list.
Right.
You suffered all.
Rabbeinu Bechai says, now Rabbeinu Bechai says unbelievable. Rabbeinu Bechai is Hakdama to Parshas in the beginning, not the Hakdama, but in the very beginning of Parshas Achai Yisara. Ki yoytze bo nomran Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim Yud Zayin Shana Kishapiresh Yosef Mimenu V'Yud Zayin Shana b'Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived 2 sets of 17 years. The last 17 in Mitzrayim, and the 17 years from when Yosef was born until he left him. A total of how many years did Yaakov live? Vayechi! 34. Vayechi! 34. Vayechi Yaakov B'Yeretz Mitzrayim Sheva Esrei Shana. You know how long Yaakov lived? Vayechi. 34 years. Tell Rabbeinu Bechai, you appreciate it. Rabbeinu Bechai says, Vayechi Yaakov Ki heim hayu ikar chayav shel Yaakov v'chomash shebeintayim hayu chayetzar.
So we had 10 sons before Yosef was born, and this he wasn't living. He got no knockers from them.
That's the real Vayechi. In other words, it's the connection that he had with Yosef. Says Rabbeinu, says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the same idea that Hushamar HaKasav, and all the peace Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim Elu hayu chayav v'lo kedem v'smach l'zeh oimroi Vayehi yimei Yaakov shnei chayav l'rames b'hem hein hayu yamav shahayu b'hem chiyus. And then Rabbeinu, then the Or HaChaim HaKadosh adds that Hakol hoylech achar ha chasima. There's a concept kol misha soif yamav b'toiva kilu kol yamav b'toiva. Like it says, v'haya reishischa mitzar v'achrischa yiske moed. Even if your beginning is small, your end will be very great. Toiv achris davar me reishisai. This is a pshat. Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim Shvei Shana. The truth is Yaakov's beginning, the first 130 were sour. But the last 17, he really lived. But since the last 17 years he had life, Vayehi Yimei Yaakov Shnei Chayav Sheva Shanim V'Yarbam Mashana. So now it's like he lived 147 years. Since everything follows the chasima, since everything follows the end, once the last 17 years were good, so that gives a certain redeeming quality to his entire life. But Rabbi say everything we said up until now was not what I want to focus on. What I want to tell you is, Mamish Adavar Oyoim V'Noira. We began to learn about it last year. Now we're going to take it to the next level this year. Be'ezus Hashem. Look at number 11. Vayomer Aleihem Yaakov Aviem. Yaakov, their father, said to them. Yaakov, their father, said to them, Oisi shikaltem, you bereft? I'm bereft. Yosef einenu, v'Shimon einenu, v'es ben yom tigal, olai hayu kolana. It's been a bad life. And look in Parshas Miketz, from the time Yaakov Avinu said these words, I'm going to tell you something I never knew before. The word Yaakov does not appear in the Chumash.
What do you mean? From then on?
From that point on, the Torah doesn't say the name Yaakov. Until this week's Parsha. It's actually until Vayigash.
That's good. He scrolls higher.
Until Vayigash, Yaakov does not appear. When does it appear? Look in number 12 in Pasuk. So for 5 prakim, Yaakov doesn't appear. From the time Yaakov uttered the words, Oisi shikaltem, Yosef einenu, Shimon einenu, Binyam digov, Halai kulana, that's the end of Yaakov Avinu.
Not Yisrael.
Only Yisrael. Only, right. In other words, the name Yaakov doesn't appear. Only Yisrael, Yisrael, Yisrael. Until then, Yaakov, Yisrael, Yaakov, 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 Yisrael. From that point on, no Yaakov.
Yisrael is higher.
I don't know if it's better, it's not. I'm just making that observation.
So what does it show? Yisrael is higher.
I'm not saying what it shows you. I'm just pointing it out right now. But then, once Yaakov hears the good news, Vayedabru Elav is called Divrei Yosef, Divrei Aleim. Vayaris ha'agolis ha'shashal yozozeh. Vatichi ruach Yaakov avihim. Back and better than ever. Back to Yaakov.
Okay, what's the first one? What?
Now it happens to be Vayal in the beginning of number 2. Vayalim mitzvah vayavoyu eretz Canaan el Yaakov avihim. That's really the first time it says Yaakov. So the question is, and by the way, this is not my observation. We're going to see this is the observation of the Shla Kadosh, as well as Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem. We have never mentioned him in the Shiur. Not the Baal Shem Tov. Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem was hundreds of years before the Baal Shem Tov. He was in the generation of the Shla Kadosh, one of the early Mekubalim. He both the Shla and Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem, they observe the name Yaakov does not appear from the time Yaakov says Oisi Shikaltem until he gets the good news. Rabbi say we're going to mention very briefly what we learned last year from the Alshech HaKadosh, and then we're going to see something unbelievable. On the Inyan of Yaakov Avinu Loimes, right? The Gemara says that Masech Tainus and Avhei Beis, the famous Gemara, Rav Nachman and Rav Yitzchak were sitting in a Suda. Rav Nachman says to Rav Yitzchak, tell me something good. So Rav Yitzchak said, no problem. The halacha is you can't talk by a meal. That's the good thing I want to tell you. So then, when he finished eating, he said, the something good I heard from Rabbi Yochanan is Yaakov Avinu Loimes. So Rabbi Yitzchak asked, what do you mean? Did the eulogizers eulogize for nothing? I mean, rabbis take a big sum for a eulogy. Rabbis got paid a lot of money. And the embalmers embalmed him for nothing, and they buried him for nothing. So he said, no, I darshan a pasuk, v'yata al tira abdi Yaakov, v'yata Yisrael, kini mayashim rachov v'zarach me'eretz shivyam, makash ulazarim azar b'chayim, makash b'chayim. And so we have a drasha Yaakov Avinu Loimes, which everybody wants to know what in the world that's supposed to mean. He's in the ground. He's 6 feet under. When we go to the Maras HaMachpelah, what are we doing? We're talking to a living person. Yaakov Avinu was buried. So the Alshich says, we learned this last year. Basically, there's a concept that Yaakov Avinu has 2 names, Yaakov and Yisrael. A name implies a description of a person's koichos hanefesh. Right? Like Moshe Rabbeinu also had 10 names. That means he's so multifaceted and multidimensional. Yaakov Avinu Loimes, but Avada Yisrael died. In other words, the bechina of his neshama Yisrael, that died. The bechina of Yaakov never died. The lower madrega never died. The Alshech HaKadosh says, look at number 14. Let's try to read it very quickly, and then you'll hear the really unbelievable. V'lamoid al ha'inyan, nisoira al loshen ha'mikra. We could ask, ki halo yipalek, ki kol ha'makim asher yazkar misal Yaakov. Whenever it says misa by Yaakov, b'shem Yisrael yichaneu. He's always called Yisrael. Uva'makim asher yazkar gevia va'asifa bli askaras maves, b'shem Yaakov yichaneu oisai. It says like this. Whenever it says Misa, it says Yisrael. Whenever it says Gevia, what does Gevia expire? It says Yaakov. Ki hinei ne'amar vayomer Yisrael amusapam. Yisrael said, I'm going to die. Vayomer Yisrael Yosef hinei anochi meis. Vayikru yimei Yisrael lomos. So Yisrael is always in connection with the meaning of Misa. Ach b'Yaakov lo ne'amar rak Gevia. Shenemar vayichal Yaakov zezbona vayigva vayosef elamav. Says the Alshech, because of this question, I saw some people want to say, Yaakov is greater than Yisrael. The concept of Yaakov is greater. Yisrael died, but Yaakov, the higher Madrega, never died. Says the Alshech, just the opposite. Amnam asher chashavti lemifshat kinaplich. What's the opposite? Ki kasher nikro shema Yisrael. He had a certain added ruach and a shama. V'nei yadua. What's Misa? Misa is when the nefesh separates from the guf. The added madrega of Yisrael, that died. That's separated from the guf of Yaakov Avinu. And that is why whenever it says Misa, it says Yisrael. Vayomer Yisrael amusa apam. Vayomer Yisrael hine anochi meis. Vayikruvu yemei Yisrael lamos. Because that madrega, that died. That was completely removed from him. That's why whenever it says Misa, it says Yisrael. But the Bechina of Yaakov, that was never removed. It was Gavad, it expired. What does that mean, it expired? Let's say someone faints. Mm-hmm. They're not dead. Let's say somebody during the Shiur. Sometimes, I heard there's some Shiurim, the Maggid Shiur is so boring, people fall asleep. So is the person dead?
No.
I hope not. Right? They're temporarily in Shamayim or wherever they are. They fainted. They still have all their abilities, all their capacities. Their ruach and their neshama is attached to their body. By Yaakov, he never died. Why? We'll have to see why. How do I know that? Because all it says is Vayigva. In other words, if you would go to the kever of Yaakov Avinu, maybe you could wake him up. And if you'd wake him up, he would be Yaakov, but he won't be Yisrael. Yisrael left him. Yaakov didn't leave him. He's sleeping for a long time.
He's in suspension.
That's the meaning. Yaakov Avinu loy meis. Yisrael meis. In other words, Yisrael's neshama is in Shamayim. Yaakov's neshama, it's there. It's just Vayigva. So Rabbi said we learned this last year. This year we're going to take it one further level. Why did Yaakov Avinu not die and Yisrael did die? In other words, why the Madrega of Yisrael left completely and Yaakov's capacity and abilities are still hovering around his neshama? So says the Shlah HaKadosh, an amazing thing. Adavar Nayim Va'ira. Ayim V'Nayim. Metchila Akdim, and this the Shlah writes in Parshas Vayishlach. Says the Shlah, Metchila Akdim Asher Kibalti B'Mayim Rabbi saying, let me tell you a tradition I have, and it's very interesting. He says he has this tradition. He doesn't say who he has this tradition from. He says, I have a tradition, B'Masha Amru Yaakov Avinu Lo Meis Shehu Kipshutai. It's as simple. It's Pshutai Kimashma. Yaakov Avinu didn't die. Afal Gav Dechantu Oisei Chantai, even though he was embalmed. Ketzad? Yesh Lo Shnei Shemos. He has two names. Yaakov Yisrael. Riboy HaShemos, Moirois, Al Riboy Koches Nafshios, Me'adveyos HaNeshamos. Many names refer to many different levels of neshama. Listen to this. You know why Yaakov Avinu didn't die? Because he died already once. And you can only die once. When did he die? When he got the news about Yosef that his son was taken away, and then Yehuda says, not only Yosef do we have to take away, we have to take away Binyamin as well. And Yaakov said, Vayomer Yaakov oisi shikaltem, Shimon einenu, v'Yosef einenu, Binyam tikachu alai Yosef kulana. Yaakov Avinu died. Yisrael didn't die at that time. Yisrael was still kicking. At that moment, Yaakov died. From that moment and on, he was never called Yaakov for 5 prakim. Until he got the news that Yosef, he got a phone call. And all suddenly, it shook him up. And because he got the report that Yosef was still alive. Vatechi ruach, Yaakov avihem. Yaakov came back to life. Says the Shlah HaKadosh. That's why, when it came time for him to go, Yaakov said, I'm not doing this more than once. You only have to do this one time. Yeah, it's inevitable. Taxes and death, everybody. But how many times? Only one time.
Double indemnity.
Right? You can't double. So Yisrael, Vayikra Yisrael Lamos. Yaakov said, I'm not going. I already did that. I'm ready Yotzei. When Yaakov came back, Vatechi Ruach Yaakov, Yaakov had Tchias HaMesim. Okay, so it says the Shlah HaKadosh like this. V'zeh hadavar haya la'achar. He says, Uchshes Abel al Yosef Benoy, when he mourned, Mikayach Tzara, Yotza Nefesh Yaakov, V'chelek Zemes, the chelek of Yaakov died. V'loy Nishar Boirak Chelek Yisrael. V'zeh hadavar haya la'achar Tzitogel v'lavis v'atzar. And especially, not only after he heard the news about Yosef, but now that he has to take away Binyamin, now Binyamin is going to be taken away, the Heinrich Shalachos Binyamin, V'ayom aleim Yaakovim oisi shikaltem, Yosef einenu, Shimon einenu, Binyamin tikachu. Oz parcha mimenu nefesh Yaakov. Umei oisoi pam loy hiskiroi b'shem Yaakov rak b'shem Yisrael. Yaakov hayameis. Ad b'besoras Yosef ksiv. Vatichi ruach Yaakov. Sheharuach shel Yaakov chazar. Says the Shah, but one second. But that's not really the first time it says Yaakov. Because doesn't it say Yaakov in Pasuk Chafei, the Pasuk before, number 12? Vayalu mi Mitzrayim vayavoyu eretz Canaan el Yaakov avihem. So we see that Yaakov is mentioned. So what do you mean it doesn't say Yaakov until Vatechi Ruach, but it says Yaakov is mentioned? The answer is, even though Yaakov didn't know yet that Yosef was alive, but his neshama sensed it, So already as they're coming toward him, they're coming toward Yaakov Aviyam. It was already to some level, even before he got the official report, his neshama was restored. He says,
I don't mean to imply that wherever the Torah uses the word Vayigva, it's the same kind of situation?
yeah.
That somebody didn't die?
The only thing is it always says Vayigva Vayamas, but by Yaakov it doesn't say Vayigva Vayamas. It says Vayigva only. Right? He says
Vayigva and Yamas means both parts passed away.
Vayigva means not only did he expire, not only is he sleeping during the share, but he ain't coming back. Avagav dila'el minei koidam v'atachi ruach Yaakov ksiv. Before it says Vayavoyu it's Kanan el Yaakov. V'yim vayagidu leimar od Yosef chai. V'yachar shabo says man chazar vayechi kara Yaakov. The answer is he already was revived. Ki bevadei miyad shezvad Yosef v'echav v'yached b'meim. Certainly as soon as Yosef revealed himself, the life, the vitality of Yaakov already began to bubble. Nimsa chilek Yaakov hoya tchias hamesim. Once Yaakov has tchias hamesim, einoi bedin sheyamas oid. Why should he have to die again? The nishar zeh chilek chai nitzchi. The chilek of Yaakov lived forever. Ki chazar liyachar atchi aliyos b'nefesh chai nitzchi. Yaakov Avinu, when you come back to this world, how did Yaakov come back? There's only one way to come back to this world. Tchias hamesim, with the tal of tchia. Yaakov mamish had tchias hamesim. So Yaakov Avinu loy meis. Why? Because kvar hoya meis. He came back together tchias hamesim. Now he's living. Everybody else has to wait ba'achras hayomim. Yaakov already was living ba'achras hayomim in Mitzrayim. So he says, v'chayus hagufani hamitzah nefesh Yisrael. His physical existence, he was like, he had two entities going on. He was living the Achros Hayomim Dika life as a Yaakov, and he was living a Olam Hazeh Dika life as Yisrael. And at the end of his life, Yisrael died, but Yaakov Avinu continued going. 1 second. V'zeh ha'chelik meis, the chelik of Yisrael died. So like it says, Vayikvu meis Yisrael Amos. Ava Yaakov nishar chai mechupaf hanefesh v'levoshalai. So I just want to point out.
This is a shlo according to the Chazal say this any place?
So I saw in the Sefer Shvili Pinchas, he says we don't know where the shlo gets us from, because he starts off by saying Masha Kibalti. He has a tradition. He doesn't say he saw in the Arizal or he saw in the Zayar, he just says he has a tradition. But in the Sefer, you ready for this one? I never even heard of the Sefer before. The name of the Sefer is Michlal Yoifi. It's on Sefer Koheles, written by Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem. Rabbi Eliyahu Mivar Maiza. Rabbi Eliyahu, I don't know if the Maral made a goylam. There's a question. Probably the Maral did not make a goylam. But Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem, it's well known. It's already it's well known. Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem made a goylam. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, in the Chuvas of Chacham Tzvi, who the Chacham Tzvi was a descendant of Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem, he refers to the goylam that his Zayda made. I gave a shir about it. Yeah. The Goylam shir, yeah. No, not the people that come to the shir. Okay, it was about, okay. So he says like this. Achein. What?
The Golan was Vayigva, he came back.
Yeah. So he says like this. Achein, Lefi inyanenu, hu al derech sha'amru zal Yaakov avinu lo meis. Ki yadua, sheshino Hashem goyremes neshama chadasha. A new name creates a new neshama. U'shekar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yaakov Yisrael, nizdam naloi neshama chadasha. He had a new neshama. Nisa. Right, correct. Nisafes al rishana. So he had an added neshama. That's the Indian of Shinoi Hashem. U'shenizkar. Excuse me. U'shenimkar Yosef. When Yosef was sold, nistalka mimenu haneshama harishana shel Yaakov. The original neshama left. Tisav letzar period min ha'olam, and he experienced the pain of leaving the world, the hainu tsar hamavis, which is the pain of death. Uchshenes basar sheYosef melech Mitzrayim, uchsiv v'atachi ruach Yaakov avim shechazra elav haneshama shel Yaakov, uchshemes Yaakov nichtav b'soif Vayechi b'chol makom Yisrael v'lo yuzkar shmo shel Yaakov ki kfar sov l'tzar misa ukamer utrei katala like hatlina. Remember one of the great principles of this Shiur: you can't die twice. You can't kill a dead person. V'haneshama shel Yaakov adayin kayemes. The soul of Yaakov stands. And it protects us like a mother that protects her children. And this is the meaning of Yaakov Avinu lo meis. So it's suggested in the Sefer Shvilei Pinchas, Tavshin Ayin Hey, that just came out this week. And I just got Sunday night. Mayato, he wants us to say, now we are enlightened to understand Vayechi Yaakov V'Eretz Mitzrayim 17 Shana. Sharei Lefi HaMavuar, based on the Shla, based on the Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem. You see how beautifully this fits in with the Alshich. The Alshich is the one who learns Yisrael died. Yaakov Avinu didn't die. When it says Yaakov Avinu loy meis, it doesn't mean he didn't die in the sense that we understand. It means the Yisrael died completely. Physically, spiritually, in the Neshamas and Shamayim. But the Chelek of Yaakov Avinu did not die. Right? The Chelek of Yaakov Avinu, still, it did expire. He's not breathing, but it hovers over him. And the reason is supplied by the Shla and Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem. Why? Because he already experienced that one time. So now we understand. Shari Lefi HaMavuar, the Neshama of Yaakov left at the time of Chiras Yosef. That was the Geder of Misa for the Neshama of Yaakov. V'nishara etzle rak nishmas Yisrael. But when he got to Besura Toiva, that Yosef's still alive, and the Torah reports, Vatechi ruach Yaakov Aviyam nimsel fizeh, that Yaakov Avinu had Tchias HaMesim. This is what it means. Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim Sheva Esrei Shana. That Vayechi, he was getting up together Tchias HaMesim, and therefore the Torah continues. But he got up with Tchias HaMesim, but maybe it ended there. Maybe it only ended. It lasted 17 years. So therefore the Torah says, Vayikruvu Yemei Yisrael Lamos. Shaloi nitel achshav. Don't make a mistake to think. Ki acharei Sheva Esrei Shanim nistalka mimenu Yaakov. Ki be'emes rak nishmas Yisrael left. Aval the neshama of Yaakov Avinu loy meis. This is the meaning of Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim Sheva Esrei Shana. We know he lived in Mitzrayim 17 years. The point is, it was Vayechi. It was Begeder Tchias HaMesim, and even that never ended because it's only Vayikruvu Yemei Yisrael Lamos. But Yaakov Avinu loy meis. Rabbi Agun Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.